My name is Yasmin Shafi, and this is my story for Colourful Heritage. I was born in Glasgow in Stobhill Hill Hospital in 1956, and at that point in my early years we lived in the Gorbals in Oxford Street, and the primary school that I went to, there were hardly any Asian children at all. And I honestly don't know how I learnt to speak English, because we didn't go to separate classes. I think there was only about 2 children in the whole school, but somehow we must have just picked it up. My dad came over in the 1950s, just after the war, when they were recruiting people to come to UK because they were shortage of workers. So my dad came over first, and he had borrowed money from relations because Dad had come from the villages in Pakistan and from a big family, and there wasn't enough, work there. So he decided to come over here with a few of his friends from the village. So when he came over here, it was manual work they did first of all, and it didn't really agree with my dad. So he went on to become a peddler. But meanwhile, whilst he was doing that, he was saving up money to bring his family over. At that point, it was my mum and 3 children. So he saved up the money, first of all, to pay back what he had borrowed, and then he saved up again to, get my mum and my brothers and sisters to come over. Well, when my dad first came over, he used to tell us the stories that they lived in, I think, a flat, and there was about 5 or 6 of them, and they were all men that had come over from the village, and they all helped each other. And that is one thing that really I do remember very, very clearly, that the community spirit, was always there. They were always helping each other. And these people would help each other in that they would tell, where to go for groceries, how to get work, what kind of work was suitable for them. And when my dad first came here, he was illiterate. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, there was no English. So it really is fascinating to think back now that how they did. They were the true pioneers in that time. We didn't have carpets, we didn't have television, and I do remember Mum used to boil the kettle, and it was on an open fire. And she really had to make a lot of savings because there wasn't a lot of money. So she would boil water on the open fire. And I don't even think we had halal chicken then. I do remember Dad going to farms and buying meat from there. And they would come home and they would, zibba them in the house. And because there was no meat shops then. But that is my kind of earliest memories. And we didn't have a bath. That was another thing I do remember in our house. It was just a toilet. And my younger sister and I, because we were very young, we would be bathed in the house, but my family always had to go to the council baths. And I always remember in our own school in Gorbals Primary, there was a day that baths came and showers came, and they all were in the playground. And there was a certain time and day that we all had to go down, and they were all individual cubicles. I don't know how they set them up, but we all used to take a hot shower then, and it must have been the same for other families as well. I'm not just talking about Asian families here, but Scottish families as well. Mum, I know, because they all came from the village, they kept very close-knit with other people who had come, other families that had come. And I think that's really how Mum got by, because the community spirit was very, very strong at that point, and we visited each other's houses a lot, and we helped each other a lot, and whatever was made in one house was then shared with everybody. And that was, I think my mum really didn't speak a lot of English, and I think she found it hard to make Scottish friends as well, because it was all very, very new in those days. And my dad, he was a peddler, and as I said before, he was illiterate, he couldn't read or write, but I know he used to pack a case with like skirts and jumpers and things to sell, but he would get a bus, because we didn't have a car in those days either, and go to places like Largs and Greenock and Loch Lomond, and go round houses and ask if they wanted to see what he had to sell. He would then open his suitcase and they would have a look, and then He had a book where he would mark in how much they were to pay, and Dad would go around, and it was obviously the old money in those days, go and collect 2 and 6 or 2 shillings every week, and then show them maybe more clothes that they would want to buy from him. And I do remember when I was young, when Dad did have the car going with him, and I would sit in the car whilst Dad would go round his customers. But Dad learnt a lot of his English through this interaction with, the Scottish people, whereas Mum, I think, didn't get that chance because she was mixing more with people who had come from Pakistan, like herself. My earliest memories is we lived in 27 Oxford Street, and there was a mosque that was converted from a hall or something, I can't remember, but it was just downstairs from us. And a lot of the people who attended the mosque would come up to our house first before we all went down together. But the teaching in the mosque in those days was very formal and very structured, and I don't really have any kind of positive experiences from it, and I think it's probably me that I didn't know what the value was of going to the mosque apart from kind of a social thing. My parents came from Jagrama, and which is near a village near Faisalabad, and my mum came from Busti, which is a village near Faisalabad as well. Initially, I did not attend nursery school. We had no English. I don't even know if there was nursery in those days. But my earliest days, we did not have any English. We went to school, and I found the experience in the schools a little bit traumatic initially, because I remember one incident in primary 1 where my mum wasn't well and I had to go to dinner school, and a very kind dinner lady was trying to help me with my dinner, which was sausages and potatoes. Now, I knew we were not allowed to eat the sausages, but I didn't have the English to explain this to her. So she was chopping them up and trying to put them into my mouth, and I can remember that to this day, because there wasn't the knowledge of Islam that we have nowadays, and there was no halal meals. But that is an incident that, sticks out in my mind. There was one incident that really does stick out in my mind. I think it was Eid, one of our special festivals, and my mum had put on me a red velvet dress with kind of gold embroidery that she had got sewn from one of her friends for me, and I was sent to school like that. And the head teacher, I remember, took me around all the classes and made me stand up on the tables and do a twirl for them, which made me feel really important and valued at that point. I think back now, it did value my culture and where I came from. But I have good recollections of all the teachers and of experiences that we had, and I don't know how I acquired English, but it just seemed to have come. And my friends were obviously mostly all Scottish people, and I don't know, we just played the same games that they played. And there was one girl that I do remember was very friendly with. She was the janitor's daughter, so we used to go into the playground during the summer holidays, and her dad would give us the little bottles of milk that was, the classes used to get in those days. So if there was any extra, we used to get them. But I do remember having that great big playground to play in during the summer months, which was really good, because Oxford Street is quite a busy street in those days, and it's on a main road, so there was no garden or anywhere to play with. No, there were never any classes for extra English or anything. This is why I'm saying to you, I just don't honestly know how I acquired the English, that we just seem to have picked it up because there was no extra classes. So when I was at 8th Street Primary, I just wanted to fit in and be like the other children there. But I do remember there was a stigma then about what we ate, about curries and the smell and so forth. So I would always be embarrassed to say anything about what we ate. But again, I made lots of Scottish friends. Again, there was hardly any Asian children in that school as well. But the teachers, again, I found very, very positive towards you. They all wanted to help you. I didn't feel treated any differently. In fact, one of the reasons I went into teaching was because of a primary 7 teacher who showed me a clipping of a newspaper and said that this was the first Asian teacher to come in to teaching, and she said to me that if I worked really hard, that could be me one day. And that is really what inspired me to go into teaching and later on in life. Mum had her own group of friends that she interacted with, and they were all from the villages, and she was quite happy you know, with them, and they learned to knit together, and they would go to the parks, they would take the children. I do remember these experiences, and all the mums would sit in a corner and they would take their sandwiches and so forth, and the children played round about, and that's where all the mums sat and did the knitting, and they showed each other what to do. And I think that was really, you know, how they interacted and how they passed their times in those days. As I moved on to secondary school, I found that I made friends more with the Asian children, because this is where the cultural differences started to come up with the other children. Obviously, they would be going to their dances and they would be hanging out with boyfriend, girlfriend, whereas in our culture, obviously, that's not, you know, really looked upon as a good thing to do. So I had more Muslim friends in those days. And sometimes because of that, we did have a few racist incidents, other children annoying us, because our group was mainly of Asian children. But I must admit again, the teachers were always very supportive, and they always nipped that in the bud. And later on in life, I think we did then make friends with other Scottish children as well in the school. And, you know, they wanted to listen to our stories, and they wanted to, you know, learn about our culture. And I felt they were more, you know, just acceptable of the way we were. In secondary school life, I did used to attend a Quranic class, and that was just a lady who lived in our close, and she taught us the Quran. But she just taught us in Arabic. We had no meaning of what the Quran was telling us or telling us what to do. Because my parents, again, were from backgrounds that they didn't really understand what the Quran was saying, they would just tell us to cover our heads, to read our prayers, but we didn't know why we were doing it. So a lot of the time was spent, you know, with your parents telling you to do certain things, and you really didn't do them because you didn't understand why. But my Urdu school, I do remember again going to, I think it was Abbotsford Primary. We used to go there to learn Urdu, and that was because, again, I was forced, but again, it was a very kind of formal way of teaching. Later on, when I was maybe about 15, 16, my dad had bought a grocery shop, as a lot of Asians did have in those days, and I used to help out at weekends and holidays. But I used to find that work very, very boring, and I knew I really did need to get out of that because I didn't enjoy shop work at all. And my dad was very good. He always encouraged me, because he was illiterate himself. He wanted us to do well. So he encouraged me to study and get my hours that I needed to go to Jordan Hill. But some of the experiences that I had when I did used to go into the shop occasionally was some of the Scottish people asking me what I was studying for, and if I would tell them I was doing teaching, they would kind of look at me as if, my goodness, you must be really clever to become a teacher, as if, you know, because you're Asian, you know, you can't do this role. So it was straight after I finished secondary school, 18, and I got straight into Jordan Hill in those early days. I must admit, I did find the journey there quite daunting at times, because one minute you were sitting behind a table, you know, being taught, and then all of a sudden you were becoming a teacher and you were on the other side of the field. And I know it took me a while to build up my confidence. But I do remember once being in a great big lecture a hall full of lot of students, and a lecturer stopping the lecture and turning around to me and saying, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" in a very slow speech, which really made me feel very embarrassed. And I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me, because I was just wanting to fit in with everybody else, and I didn't want to be singled out. But that was my only incident that I would feel that, you know, I felt, oh, wait a minute here, this is something that's singling me out. But the rest of my teaching, you know, student days, I found really, really quite positive, apart from, as I've said initially, I found it difficult because I wasn't very confident. But once my confidence came, I felt I really enjoyed it, and I knew I had chosen the correct profession to get myself into. And in my early teaching days, when I actually did become a teacher, there were a few racist incidents in that parents had come up and objected to their children being taught by a coloured teacher. But my head teachers were always so supportive and so very good that they never even let me get wind that somebody had come in and complained about me. And they were always very positive and encouraging, and I really enjoyed my teaching days. And early on I did go to Glendale Primary, which is in Pollokshields, and there were a lot more Asian children there. And in that school I felt I could help the other teachers understand the culture, you know, why children were doing certain things, and some mums didn't speak English, so I could, you know, translate for the mums and tell them what's expected of them. And there was a lot of things that I felt I could help my community and the Sikh community, because obviously they spoke Punjabi as well. I really love my role as a teacher, and I really feel that it's something that I can give back to the community as well, and it's really my forte. And now that I've retired, I've joined Al Mizan, is, you know, somewhere where I go now to teach the children there as well, and it's Islamic studies we do, but we do it in English, and all my teaching skills now come into really very good use, because I am now helping the other teachers here how to actually put things across to the children, how to do it in a professional way, and how to do interactive work and doing structured play with the younger children, only with a Islamic input. So all of this has been really positive for me. I didn't really want to be any different from the other children at school, and I used to, I think, hide my religion really, and I didn't want to be any different, so I would just do what the normal children were doing. And it was only at home where we learnt the Quran, where we read Salah, where we kept fasts. I really kept that all a secret, and I wouldn't want most of the children to know about it. But when I went into college to do my teacher training, obviously RE is one of the subjects that we study, and then it was a bit more open. And obviously when I went into teaching, into schools where there were Asian children, that brought my religion more into the forefront, and I felt I could practice it. But for myself, the turning point for me was when I was about 40, when my parents passed away. I really needed answers, and I started going to classes which were interpreting the Quran in English, so we knew what the Quran was telling us. And the more I studied it, the more I realised it was the truth for me, and it was giving me all the answers that I wanted. And when the verses came, you know, talking about covering the head for the ladies, covering your hair, I then wanted to take on the hijab, but I was a wee bit reluctant because I didn't know how people would react to me. So initially I would just put it on my head and not pin it on. But gradually I had the courage to start putting it on all the time, and, you know, really nobody really questioned me. In fact, one of the questions was, is your husband making you wear it? And I said, no, I'm not doing it for my husband, I'm doing it for myself. Who are my colleagues, they value all the things I can tell them about Islam, because I am their only Muslim friend for a lot of them. They're all professionals, and their knowledge of me cascades then onto their friends. I think nowadays Islam in the media is portrayed quite negatively, and really that does really concern me, because our Islam preaches peace, and the knowledge I have of it is not the knowledge that the media sometimes give out. I mean, to be fair, sometimes they do have very good documentaries, you know, but sometimes I feel they put them on at a very late time, and people are not really maybe up at that time or are aware of them. I feel Scottish people are very accepting of Islam and of our religion. My colleagues and my friends that are all non-Muslims, you know, they know that it's Eid and they'll send you a gift over, and I don't really think that they, you know, get that same picture that sometimes other people, but there are pockets where there is racism, and even when you go into a shop and you're wearing a hijab or you're talking to somebody that you don't know, you know, they do sometimes start talking as if you don't understand, but as soon as you open your mouth they realise that, you know, obviously, you know, you do understand and your accent is very good, so, you know, they are more accepting of you. I would call myself a Scottish Muslim, and I believe that Glasgow is my home. I am thoroughly Glaswegian. I love it when I hear the bagpipes. It stirs something inside me, and I've even travelled up north to a lot of the islands, and I do call this my home. I think my key message to people would be, Muslims, I would say, try to keep a balance between your life here and your religion, When I was younger growing up, we didn't have the opportunities and the knowledge and the media and the internet and all these things that you can get, the vast knowledge of Islam that you can, but it's getting that balance right of what life is like living here and trying to get the balance of your religion as well at the same point.